There's a man you've never met, not in person anyway. He exists in the moments you've deliberately avoided. He lives in the silence you've been running from. He's waiting in the space between your phone notifications, in the hours when the world goes quiet and you're forced to be alone with your own thoughts. That man is stronger than you are right now. He's sharper. He sees further. He moves with a clarity that your current self can't even comprehend. And the worst part, he's you. Just a version of you that you've been too afraid to become. If you're over 35, you know what I'm talking about. You've spent 20 years in the system, 20 years of climbing, 20 years performing, 20 years doing exactly what you were supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, you lost touch with who you actually are. You became a father or a boss or a provider. You became reliable, responsible, predictable, and you mistook that for being powerful. But power isn't about being predictable. Power is about being dangerous. And you can't be dangerous when everyone already knows exactly what you're going to do. Most men in your position spend their entire lives running from silence. They fill every gap with noise. The drive to work is filled with podcasts. The break at the office is filled with emails and texts. The evening is filled with family obligations and NEWS and screens. They swipe, they scroll, they talk, they manage. They surround themselves with people who validate their weaknesses and reinforce their illusions. A wife who depends on them, children who need them, colleagues who need their approval, friends who drain them. And they call this living, they call this success. But here's what they don't realize. The man you could become in silence is infinitely more powerful than the man you are right now. And at your age, you don't have time to waste on the illusions anymore. Society doesn't want you to know this. Your friends don't want you to know this. The algorithm doesn't want you to know this. But I'm going to show you why being alone isn't a weakness. It's the most strategic move you can make at this stage of your life. And if you've been sensing that there's a stronger, sharper version of you waiting to emerge, if you feel like you've been compromising your power for acceptance, then comment, "I'm ready right now." Because everything changes from this moment forward. The truth that nobody wants to admit is this: constant social noise destroys your judgment. And by your age, poor judgment is expensive. It costs you money. It costs you relationships. It costs you time that you genuinely cannot get back. When you're always around people, always consuming input, always managing multiple agendas, your mind becomes a battlefield for everyone else's priorities. You start thinking in layers. One part of you is trying to figure out what you actually believe about your life. Another part is calculating how your boss will perceive your decisions. A third part is managing your wife's expectations. A fourth is trying to be relevant to your kids. A fifth is maintaining your image with friends. Your authentic thoughts get buried under an avalanche of competing demands, and you mistake this exhaustion for being responsible. You mistake it for being a good man. Constant social and professional interaction rewires your brain in specific ways that damage your long-term interests. You become conflict avoidant because conflict threatens multiple relationships at once. You become people-pleasing because you've got too many people depending on your stability. You become predictable because predictability feels safer than authenticity. And because you're all of these things, you're also easy to control. Your wife knows exactly what will make you feel guilty. Your boss knows exactly what will make you work harder. Your kids know exactly what will make you give in. Your friends know exactly how to pull you back into old patterns. You're not one coherent self anymore. You're a collection of roles, each one calibrated to different people's expectations. And with yourself, you barely exist at all. You've been so busy managing everyone else that you've forgotten what it feels like to be yourself. But here's where it gets darker. This fog of constant obligation doesn't just weaken your judgment, it actively blinds you to opportunities. By 35, most men should be in their peak earning and influence years. But instead, you're still playing it safe, still seeking approval from people who don't have your best interests at heart, still avoiding hard conversations because avoiding conflict feels easier. Still, surrounding yourself with people who think exactly like you, because disagreement feels threatening, and slowly, imperceptibly, your window closes. The opportunities that you could have seized in your 40s become much harder to take advantage of. The career moves you could have made become less possible. The relationships you could have built are being replaced with obligations you're stuck managing. You're also becoming invisible in a different way. Your kids are getting older. They don't need you like they used to. Your marriage, if you have one, has settled into a groove that's either comfortable or numb depending on the day. Your career is what it is. You're no longer the young guy with something to prove. You're not yet the elder with hard-won wisdom. You're in the middle. And if you haven't built something real, something that belongs to you, something that drives you, then what are you? You're a man who spent 35 years becoming exactly what everyone expected you to be. And now you're wondering why it all feels hollow. The strongest men in their 40s throughout history understood something fundamental. Solitude isn't a punishment. It's a strategic reset. It's the only place where the noise dies down enough for you to actually see your life clearly. Machiavelli knew this better than almost anyone. When he was exiled from Florence at 43, forced to spend his time alone, away from power, away from relevance, away from the constant demands of politics, he could have despaired. He could have tried to claw his way back into favor. Instead, he used those hours differently. He studied. He observed human nature with ruthless clarity. He wrote letters describing how he would shed his mud-covered clothes each evening, put on his formal courtier's robes, and enter his study to commune with the ancients and the lessons of history. In those hours of solitude, he wasn't just thinking, he was rewiring his mind. He was stripping away the political conditioning that had accumulated over decades. He was seeing human beings clearly for the first time, without the distorting lens of courtly performance. And what emerged from that solitude? The Prince, one of the most influential books on power ever written, not because Machiavelli was smarter than everyone else, but because he had done something that most men never do. He had separated himself from the noise long enough to think clearly about what actually matters. And he did it at an age where most men think their best work is behind them. Solitude didn't make him weak, it made him dangerous. It gave him insight. It gave him the ability to predict human behavior with unsettling accuracy. Because when you remove yourself from the daily grind, you stop seeing people as your colleagues or your family or your obligations. You start seeing them as they actually are. Complex, predictable, driven by fear and desire, just like everyone else. And this clarity at your age is worth more than money. Here's what happens when you, as a man over 35, spend significant time alone. First, the noise dies down. The constant background radiation of expectations gradually decreases. Fewer meetings that demand your energy. Fewer conversations where you're performing. Fewer subtle jabs at your confidence from people who barely matter. And then something strange happens. You start to think. Not the kind of thinking where you're problem-solving the next crisis or planning how to manage the next demand. But the deeper kind. The kind where you're asking yourself real questions. Who am I when I'm not being what everyone else needs me to be? What do I actually want from the next 20 or 30 years? Have I been building towards something real or just managing decline? These questions are uncomfortable. They're supposed to be. Comfort is what keeps men your age complacent. But as you sit with these questions, something else begins to happen. The illusions you've been maintaining start to crack. You realize that most of the people in your life aren't truly invested in your growth. They're invested in you staying exactly as you are because your stability, your predictability, and your willingness to sacrifice make them feel safe. You realize that most of your accomplishments were driven by external validation and obligation rather than genuine purpose. You realize that you've been living your life according to a script that was handed to you in your 20s and you've never actually rewritten it for yourself. And in that moment, when you finally see yourself clearly without the distortion of everyone's expectations, something shifts. You become dangerous. Not to others necessarily, but to the version of yourself that was content being average. Solitude is a mirror with no filter, and that's precisely why men your age avoid it. They're terrified of what they'll see, because in silence you can't hide from yourself. You can't blame your parents anymore, or your circumstances, or your bad luck. You can't make excuses about why you didn't do the thing you wanted to do. You can't post a carefully curated version of your life on social media and pretend everything is fine. You're just you, your thoughts, your failures, your regrets, your untapped potential, your cowardice. And most men break under that weight. They run back to the noise. They flood their minds with distraction. They find new people to seek approval from. They dive deeper into work or family obligations to avoid looking at themselves. But the men who stay, the men who sit in that discomfort and actually process it, those men emerge fundamentally different, harder, clearer, more powerful. And at 40, that transformation isn't just personal. It ripples into everything. Now let's go deeper into what happened when Machiavelli understood this principle. During his exile, he didn't just think abstractly about power and human nature. He studied it historically. He analyzed patterns across centuries. He watched how rulers rose and fell. He understood that power wasn't some mysterious force reserved for special people. It was a collection of predictable behaviors and psychological principles. And the key insight that emerged from his solitude was this: people are fundamentally predictable. They act from fear or from desire. They pursue status or they flee from humiliation. They're driven by survival instincts that haven't evolved in thousands of years, even though their environment has changed dramatically. Once you understand this about human nature, you can't help but become more effective at navigating your world. But here's what's crucial for a man your age. Machiavelli didn't discover these principles by reading books alone in a vacuum. He discovered them by stepping back from active participation in power games. He created distance between himself and the immediate pressures of political intrigue. And in that distance, he could think more clearly. He could see patterns that people on the inside couldn't see because they were too busy playing the game to understand how the game actually works. This is the power of strategic distance. And at your age, understanding how the game actually works is worth its weight in gold. Proximity breeds familiarity. Familiarity breeds contempt. When you're always accessible, always available, always present, people start to take you for granted. They assume they understand you. They stop respecting you. They start asking more from you. They impose more on your time. Your boss knows you'll stay late. Your wife knows you'll fix it. Your kids know you'll say yes. Your friends know you'll be there. And because they know these things, they don't respect you. Not in the way they respect someone who maintains boundaries. But when you create distance, something shifts in how people perceive you. You become more valuable, not because you're actually different, but because you're scarce. You're not constantly available. You're not constantly performing. You're not constantly seeking their approval. You exist somewhat separately from them, and that separation makes you more interesting, more intriguing, more powerful. Respect grows from distance. Leverage grows from distance. Mystique grows from distance. Every powerful man over 50 that you know has figured this out. They don't make themselves available to everyone. They don't overshare. They don't perform emotions for public consumption. They maintain a strategic separation that keeps others wondering, guessing, trying to understand them. And notice how you treat those men differently. Notice how you respect them more. Notice how their words carry more weight. That's not because they're smarter. It's because they've mastered distance. Think about the men in your life who command the most respect. I guarantee you they're not the ones constantly texting, constantly posting, constantly seeking your attention. They're not the ones who need you to validate their choices. They're the ones who maintain boundaries, the ones who are hard to reach, the ones who seem somewhat indifferent to whether you like them or not. That indifference is incredibly attractive. It's the opposite of the desperate energy that most men your age emit without even realizing it. And That desperate energy comes directly from emotional dependency. Most men have built their entire lives around being needed. They need approval from their boss to feel successful. They need validation from their partner to feel loved. They need attention from their children to feel significant. And because they need all of these things, they've surrendered their power. They're like puppets on strings, and the people holding those strings know it. Here's the psychological reality that nobody wants to admit, especially to men your age. Dependency is modern slavery. It looks completely different than traditional slavery, but it functions the same way. A slave is someone whose behavior is controlled by someone or something outside themselves. When you're emotionally dependent on others, your behavior is controlled. You say things you don't believe because you need them to like you. You do things you don't want to do because you need them to respect you. You suppress your true thoughts because you need to maintain harmony. You accept less money than you're worth because you need the job security. You stay in situations that are beneath you because you need to avoid conflict. And over time, you don't even realize that you're a slave. You think it's normal. You think it's what being a responsible man is supposed to look like. But it's not. It's a complete abdication of your power. And here's what's important to understand. This dependency makes you predictable. It makes you manipulable. Anyone who understands that you need their approval can control you. They can withhold affection to punish you. They can give praise to reward you. They can leverage your need for them against you. You become a tool in their hands, even if they don't consciously realize it. This is true in romantic relationships, friendships, family dynamics, and professional situations. Wherever there's dependency, there's the potential for manipulation. But solitude breaks this chain. When you spend time alone and actually enjoy it, when you build a life that doesn't require constant external validation, something fundamental shifts. You stop needing people as much. And when you stop needing people, you become powerful. You can set real boundaries. You can say no without guilt. You can walk away from situations that don't serve you. You can choose which relationships to invest in based on genuine connection rather than dependency. Most importantly, you can't be manipulated anymore, because manipulation only works when there's something the other person can withhold from you that you desperately need. But if you've learned to meet your own needs, if you've learned to generate your own validation, if you've learned to be genuinely okay with yourself, then what do they have over you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that realization is the beginning of true power. But there's more happening in solitude than just the absence of external noise. Your mind is actually changing at a neurological level. When you remove yourself from constant reactive stimuli, from the endless emails and texts and demands and crises, your brain starts to reorganize. The parts of your brain that handle immediate reaction and crisis management start to quiet down. The parts that handle deep analysis, pattern recognition, strategic thinking, and wisdom start to light up. You shift from reactive mode to calculating mode, from victim mentality to strategic mentality, from someone who's constantly responding to what's happening to someone who's actually thinking about what's happening and why. And at your age, this shift is everything, because you've got maybe 30 good years left to work with, and you need to make them count. This is when you start to see patterns in people and situations that were invisible to you before. You start to notice how people's words don't match their actions. You start to recognize power dynamics that you were previously blind to. You start to understand why certain conversations always go the same way. Why do certain people always trigger you? Why do certain situations keep repeating? You see the game that everyone is playing, and suddenly you're not a confused participant anymore. You're an observer, and observers have power because they understand the game well enough to play it deliberately rather than accidentally. You also start to see your own life with new clarity. You start to notice patterns in your own behavior that you've been blind to. You start to recognize where you've been sabotaging yourself, where you've been seeking approval from the wrong people. where you've been compromising on things that actually matter. And most importantly, you start to recognize what you actually want, not what you're supposed to want, not what looks good on paper, but what you actually want. And at your age, recognizing that is crucial, because you can still do something about it. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." This isn't advice to be a tyrant or a cold bastard. It's recognition of a psychological reality. Fear creates respect, and respect creates distance, and distance creates power. But fear only works if you first distance yourself enough that people aren't completely comfortable with you. If you're always available, always trying to be liked, always seeking to be close to everyone, then fear is impossible. You can't command respect through a desperate plea for acceptance. You command respect by being someone who doesn't desperately need their acceptance. You command respect by being someone who has their own life, their own priorities, their own agenda. And solitude is where you build that agenda. Now, here's something that most men your age completely misunderstand about time. They think time is just something that happens to them. They wake up, and their day is immediately claimed by other people's agendas, their boss's priorities, their partner's needs, their adult kids' problems, their parents' aging, their friends' dramas. Their responsibilities never end. By the end of the day, there's almost no time left for anything that actually belongs to them, and they accept this as normal. They think this is what their 40s are supposed to look like. But it's not normal. It's a tragedy. It's the theft of your life by 1,000 small obligations. And most men never even notice it happening until suddenly they're 55 and they realize they've wasted 2 decades on things that didn't matter. But when you embrace solitude, you reclaim your time. And time at your age is the most valuable resource you have. Time is the raw material of your life. Every moment you have is a moment you will never get back. And at 40, you're acutely aware of this in a way you weren't at 25. So the question becomes, whose agenda does your time serve? Yours or everyone else's? For most men your age, the answer is everyone else's. And that's the real cost of constant social connection and obligation. It's not that you have a few fewer hours of free time. It's that you've surrendered the ownership of your life to external forces. You don't control your own existence. You're a passenger. And passengers don't get to choose where the car goes. Strategic solitude changes this equation entirely. When you set aside time to be alone, you're doing something revolutionary. You're saying that your thoughts, your development, your growth, your actual life are important enough to be protected. You're saying that other people's immediate demands don't automatically take priority over your long-term vision. You're saying that you own your time. And when you own your time, you own your life. You can actually work towards something. You can think deeply. You can plan strategically. You can become someone instead of just reacting to whatever comes at you and hoping you're still standing when you reach 60. Here's the practical reality that separates weak men from powerful men, especially in your age bracket. Weak men have their schedule controlled by other people. Their time belongs to their boss, their family, and their obligations. Powerful men control their own schedule. A weak man says yes to every invitation, every request, every opportunity, because he's afraid of being excluded or disappointing someone. A powerful man says no to most things because he knows that saying yes to everything means he's saying no to the things that actually matter. A weak man responds to every text immediately because he needs to stay connected and available. A powerful man responds to messages on his own schedule because he has things that are more important. A weak man's time leaks away through 1,000 small interruptions and obligations. A powerful man's time is defended fiercely because he knows how rare and valuable it is. And the only way to defend your time is to have somewhere to retreat, to where nobody can claim it. That somewhere is solitude. Whether it's an hour in the morning before the world wakes up, or a full day each week where you're completely unavailable, or even a weekend where you disappear. The specific form doesn't matter. What matters is that you have time that belongs entirely to you. Time when you're not performing, not responding, not managing anyone else's emotions or crises, just being, just thinking, just exist yourself. And in that time, you're literally rewiring your life. Because when you have time to think, you start to make different decisions. You start to pursue different goals. You start to say no to things that don't align with who you actually are. You start to build relationships with people who genuinely matter to you rather than everyone convenient. You start to invest in areas of growth that actually interest you rather than the areas that get you external praise. Your life gradually aligns with your actual values instead of the values that were imposed on you. And that alignment is the foundation of power. Because when your actions are aligned with your values, you move with certainty, you move with authority, you move like someone who knows exactly what he's doing and why, and at your age, that certainty is attractive to everyone around you. Now, let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice for a man in his 40s. How do you become the man who walks alone? Because reading about it is one thing, actually doing it is something completely different. It requires ruthlessness. It requires the willingness to be perceived as cold, or rude, or aloof, or selfish. And most men your age aren't willing to pay that social cost. They'd rather stay comfortable in their mediocrity, stay in their obligations, stay in their routines, than risk the judgment of others or the discomfort of change. But if you're serious about power, if you're serious about reclaiming the next 20 or 30 years of your life, you have to be willing to accept that cost. Start by identifying the noise in your life, the people who constantly drain your energy, the habits that keep you locked in distraction, the commitments that don't serve you, the conversations that go nowhere, the obligations you've accepted that don't align with your actual priorities, the time wasters that you participate in because you don't know how to say NR because you've never actually examined them. Write them down. Be honest about it. Look at every single thing that's competing for your attention and ask yourself, does this serve my actual goals? Does this person actually add value to my life? Does this habit make me stronger or weaker? Does this obligation align with who I actually want to be? Most of the things that you're currently spending time on will fail this test. They're there because you haven't been deliberate enough to remove them. So start cutting. This is where being cold comes in. Most men will try to gently fade out of situations or relationships. They'll hope people get the hint, but that doesn't work. People don't get the hint. They just become resentful that you're not as available as you used to be. They feel rejected. They pull back. They complain to others. You have to be direct. You have to tell people no. You have to set boundaries. And yes, some people will judge you. Some people will say you've changed. Some people will say you're becoming selfish or cold or difficult. Some people will stop talking to you. That's actually a good sign because you're eliminating the people who were only interested in you for what you could give them, not for who you actually are. And the more people you eliminate who only benefit from your weakness, the more space you have for people who actually respect you. Next, build non-negotiable solitude into your schedule. Not as something you'll get to if you have time, but as something as important as eating or sleeping, because it is. The health of your mind depends on it. Treat it like a sacred commitment. Maybe it's the first hour of every morning before you check your phone or check your email. Maybe it's one full day every week where you completely disconnect. Maybe it's an evening ritual where you sit in silence for an hour. Maybe it's a weekend trip by yourself. The specifics don't matter. What matters is consistency. Your mind needs to know that it's going to have that space regularly. And during that space, you actually have to be alone. Not just physically, but mentally. Put the phone away. Close the computer. Turn off the notifications. Don't fill the silence with podcasts or audiobooks. Actually experience solitude instead of just sitting in a quiet room while your mind is still half engaged with the digital world. Use that time to think about your actual life, not in a panicked, anxious way, but in a deliberate, analytical way. What do you actually want from the next 10 or 20 years? Not what you're supposed to want, not what looks good to other people. What do you actually want? And then ask yourself, What would I have to change about my current life to make that real? What habits would I have to break? What relationships would I have to examine? What conversations would I have to have? What fears would I have to face? Don't run from these questions. Sit with them. Let them make you uncomfortable. Because discomfort is information. It's telling you where you've been compromising your power. It's telling you where you've been settling. It's telling you where you've been choosing comfort over authenticity. Finally, start observing other people with strategic distance. When you're not constantly engaged in social performance, when you're not constantly reacting to demands, you can actually see what's happening around you. You can watch how people manipulate each other. You can see how they create false intimacy. You can notice the power games that everyone is playing without acknowledging them. You can recognize where people are weak, where they're trying too hard, where they're desperate for approval. You can see the patterns, and as you see these patterns in others, you start to catch them in yourself. You become aware of your own manipulation, your own desperation. You need to be liked. And awareness is the first step to breaking free from these patterns. This is what the cold man becomes. Not someone mean or cruel, but someone is awake, someone who sees the world clearly, someone who has his priorities straight, someone whose actions are driven by his own vision rather than everyone else's expectations, someone who moves through the world with a kind of strategic indifference. He doesn't need your approval, but he doesn't despise you for wanting to give it. He doesn't need your friendship, but he's not hostile to it. He simply exists according to his own principles, and people respect him for it. They might not like him as much as they'd like someone more desperate for approval, but they respect him, they take him seriously, they fear him slightly, and that combination is far more valuable than being universally liked. But here's what's important to understand about this transformation. You don't just flip a switch and become this person overnight. It's a process. It takes time. It takes repetition. The first time you say no to someone, it will feel uncomfortable, like you're being rude, like you're betraying something, like you're letting people down. That feeling is part of your conditioning. The world has spent your entire life training you to prioritize other people's comfort over your own values. Breaking that conditioning takes repetition. It takes small acts of defiance. It takes standing alone and feeling the discomfort and not running back to the crowd to avoid it. And as you do this repeatedly, something shifts. You get stronger. You become less reactive. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't deserve explanations. You stop justifying your choices. You stop needing validation for your decisions. You simply move forward. And this is when people start to take you seriously. This is when doors open. This is when opportunities come to you instead of you chasing them. This is when younger men look at you with a kind of respect they don't show to other men. Because everyone can sense when someone has reclaimed their power. They can feel it. They don't fully understand it, but they know something is different about this person. Something is more real. The transformation isn't just about being alone. It's about using that solitude to become stronger, sharper, and more effective. It's about using that time to build a life that actually belongs to you instead of a life that's designed by committee. It's about using that distance to gain perspective that other people don't have. And when you emerge from that solitude, you emerge fundamentally transformed. You're not the same person who left. You're colder now, not in a distant, unfriendly way, but in a clear-headed way. You're colder because you're not operating from fear or from desperation. You're colder because you can see people and situations clearly without the distortion of your own neediness. You're colder because you've faced yourself in silence and you know exactly who you are. There's no confusion anymore, no performance, no contradiction between who you are alone and who you are with others. You've integrated. You've become whole. And whole people have power, especially men in their 40s and 50s who have had decades of experience to draw from. The world will notice this change. Some people will be drawn to it. They'll sense that you have something they don't have, a certainty, a clarity, a sense of purpose. They might not be able to articulate it, but they'll feel it. They'll want to be around you. They'll want to learn from you. Other people will resent it. They'll sense that you're no longer as dependent on them, and they'll pull away or lash out. They'll say you've changed, and they'll mean it as criticism. That's fine. You're not trying to keep everyone close. You're not trying to be universally liked. You're trying to build a life of actual power. You're trying to reclaim your remaining years. And power requires that you release the people who can only interact with you when you're weak. This is the choice that every man your age has to make. You can stay comfortable in the noise, in the constant obligations, in the treadmill of seeking approval and managing other people's expectations. Or you can walk into the solitude. You can face yourself. You can build something real. You can become someone worth being. You can reclaim your life. The solitude won't be easy. It will reveal things about yourself that you've been avoiding. It will show you truths about other people that will make certain relationships more difficult. It will strip away the illusions that have made your life comfortable. But on the other side of that discomfort is power. On the other side is freedom. On the other side is a version of you that you can actually respect. A version that the younger men in your life will look up to. A version that commands respect without asking for it. Machiavelli understood this, and he used it to become one of the most influential thinkers in history. He didn't do it by being the most liked. He did it by stepping back, by thinking deeply, by seeing clearly, by becoming someone worth learning from. He did it in his 40s, when most men think their best work is behind them, and you can do the same thing, not necessarily to become historically influential, but to become influential in your own life, to take control of your own narrative, to build something that actually belongs to you, to finish your life the way you want to finish it, not the way everyone else expects you to. The choice is yours. You can keep running, keep seeking approval, keep performing, keep hoping that this version of yourself will somehow become powerful without changing anything. Or you can walk alone, you can face the silence, you can do the work, you can become fundamentally different, and you can emerge as a completely different man. The man you were always supposed to be. The man who has his power. The man who walks alone because he doesn't need anyone to validate his existence. The man who finishes his 40s and 50s and beyond lives on his own terms. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to create at least one space of solitude, whether it's an hour in the morning, a full day, or an evening ritual. And during that time, I want you to be completely alone. No phone, no distractions, no noise, just you and your thoughts. And I want you to ask yourself the hard question: who am I when nobody's watching? Who am I when I'm not performing? Who am I without the need for approval? Who would I be if I had nothing to prove? Don't run from the discomfort that comes with that question. Sit with it. Let it make you uncomfortable, because that discomfort is the beginning of change. And if this message is hitting you right now, if you can feel that there's a stronger version of yourself waiting to emerge, if you can feel the pull towards something more real, then type "I walk alone" in the comments. Not because I need your validation, but because you need to declare it to yourself. You need to commit to this transformation. You need to say out loud, or at least in text, that you're done being a passenger in your own life. You're taking the wheel. You're walking alone. You're reclaiming your power. You're becoming the man you should have always been. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. This is where power starts. In the silence, in the solitude, in the willingness to be different. And get ready to become the man you were meant to be. The cold, clear, powerful man, the man who walks alone, the man who knows exactly who he is and what he wants. That man is waiting for you in the silence. Go find him.